It is my pleasure to welcome you this morning. I wish to call upon Cantor Avshalom Katz to lead us in the singing of our national anthem and Hatikva. Will everyone please rise?
Oh, Jose, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, they've proved through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Korot balevav pnima nefesh Yehudi homiha ulfatei mizrach kadima ayin letzion tzofia od lo avda tikvateinu התקווה בת שנות 2000 להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים.
From the very inception of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the late Aristides de Sousa Mendes' name has been inscribed on a special wall in our museum. A wall dedicated to those righteous individuals who at great personal risk displayed remarkable courage by saving victims from Nazi oppression and murder. Here in the Wiesenthal Center Museum, the Portuguese diplomat is inscribed with other great humanitarians, such as Raoul Wallenberg and Oskar Schindler, to whom the Jewish people, indeed to whom all people, owe gratitude. Indeed, in paying tribute to Dr. Mendes today, we all bestow a dignity upon ourselves. At this time, I wish to call upon an individual who needs no introduction to our community. Along with his colleague, Tony Coelho, Congressman Henry Waxman has spearheaded congressional recognition of Dr. Mendes and has brought the matter of recognition to the Portuguese government. Congressman Henry Waxman.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to honor one who swam against one of the coldest, bitterest tides in modern history. He's a man who looked at massive evil, one so powerful that most who beheld it were intimidated into complicity with it, and he decided to battle it head on. A man whose courage not only saved tens of thousands of people, but established an example pertinent to the moral dilemma of people everywhere and for all time. We speak of this man in such sweeping terms, and yet his name, Dr. Aristides de Sousa Mendes do Amaral e Abranches, is only now 46 years after his act of heroism, becoming well known to the world. What exactly did Dr. de Sousa Mendes do? For those unfamiliar with his story, let me briefly sketch it. A member of an old and distinguished Portuguese family, Mendes was a diplomat who had served throughout the world by the year 1940. In that year, he found himself in the Portuguese consulate in Bordeaux, France. War had broken out between Germany and France. As German tanks swept across France in the spring of that year, Jews and others fleeing Nazism poured into Bordeaux, where the French government had set up behind its retreating army's lines. The French collapse was imminent, and the only open route out of France was a trek over the Pyrenees through Spain into neutral Portugal. The Spanish would only allow those with Portuguese entry visas to pass through. As Nazi troops approached the city, tens of thousands of refugees seeking visas gathered at the Portuguese consulate. Shortly before, the Portuguese military government of Antonio de Oliveira Salazar had issued strict orders against granting visas to refugees from the Nazis, especially to Jews. Thus, Mendes had what could only have been a terribly painful choice: place his career and even his life in jeopardy to save those refugees, or preserve his security and send them all to an ultimate death. After a long night of reflection and discussion with his beloved wife, Angelina, Mendes decided that the call he felt to rescue the refugees outranked orders, even strict orders, from his government. He worked around the clock for 3 days, producing tens of thousands of visas that carried their bearers to freedom. When news of Mendes' action reached Lisbon, he was promptly dismissed from the diplomatic corps. 2 colleagues were dispatched to Bordeaux to bring him home. As they returned to Portugal by automobile, the party drove through the French border town of Bayonne, where they saw another large group of desperate refugees trying to get visas to leave. Mendes demanded to know why they were not receiving their visas, and insisted that while he was still in charge, those visas would be granted. Between these 2 groups in France, scholars estimate that 30,000 lives were saved. Back in Lisbon, Mendes' story turned into tragedy. The Portuguese government came down with full force upon him. Expelled from the diplomatic corps, disgraced and forbidden to practice law, he was unable to earn a living. He was forced gradually to sell all of his property in order to survive. Most of his 14 children, with no prospects in Portugal, emigrated. Angelina died in 1948, and Mendes died penniless in 1954. From the moment of his punishment, Mendes had begun, with the help of his wife and children, a battle to be exonerated. After his death, his children carried on that fight. Scattered articles appeared in newspapers and magazines. Scholars of the Holocaust documented his story. Yad Vashem in Jerusalem awarded him a posthumous medal in 1967 inscribed with a Talmudic dictum, "One who saves a human life saves, as it were, the whole world." Yet he remained largely unknown to the general public. When I became involved in this case in the spring of this year, the Portuguese government, after 46 years of petitioning by his family and others, still had done nothing to clear his name. Not until the United States Congress acted did they change. Congressman Tony Coelho, my colleague from the state of California, who is of Portuguese descent, who unfortunately couldn't be with us here today, and I coordinated a campaign where we introduced a congressional resolution calling for action and meeting with the Portuguese Prime Minister during his recent visit to Washington, we raised the case of de Sousa Mendes. Thus, it was with great satisfaction last month that we learned from the Portuguese government that it intends to publicly recognize the heroism by granting de Sousa Mendes a Medal of Honor. Our campaign to honor Dr. Mendes will not end now. We'll continue to work with the governments of Portugal, Israel, and the United States, as well as with the Wiesenthal Center, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council, and other institutions to ensure his proper place in history. Having outlined the story and our response to it, let us consider for a moment the more important question. Why are we doing this? Why do we pay such attention to an occurrence that occurred 46 years ago? Our reason clearly is that we want to see justice done, want to remove the cloud of disgrace from Mendes and his family. But it is more than a love of justice that brings us together today and drives our work on this case. It also is the belief that an act of courage and righteousness as dramatic and effective as this simply should be remembered. It ought to become a part of our collective consciousness, a reminder of what a single righteous person can do. President Andrew Jackson, who admired the virtue of courage above all others, once said, "One man with courage makes a majority." For those tens of thousands of refugees in southern France, everything was going against them. The awesome armed force of the Nazis, the impassability of the nearest borders, the fear among ordinary citizens of sticking up for them, and the sheer indifference of so many others. Yet the strength of one person's will to do right overcame it all. Mendes created a majority of one, and in doing so gave the greatest possible gift, life, to tens of thousands of people. In looking at the sweep of human history, we do not find many heroes of this caliber. We must therefore celebrate and memorialize those we have. We must not let Mendes sink to the bottom of history's murky sea. Instead, he should be placed as a lighthouse to shine in times of moral darkness, to prod us to listen to our conscience, even when they tell us to tread a dangerous or unpopular path. In closing, let me say that Elie Wiesel, of whom we are especially proud this week for having received the Nobel Prize for Peace, has often said that the greatest accessory to evil is indifference. Today we celebrate a man who was anything but indifferent, one who could not understand indifference and could not practice it. That is the legacy he leaves us, the lesson he teaches us. Let us heed it, and we will make this a better world in which to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Waxman. At this time, I wish to call upon the Dean and founder of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, Rabbi Marvin Heyer.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is not only a great privilege, a zchus, to be able to speak on an occasion such as this, but it also is an appropriate symbolism to what we are doing here this morning, to have in our midst over there on the left side a sukkah. As you know, we are in the midst of the celebration of the festival of Sukkot, known as the Festival of Booths, when Jews around the world leave their permanent homes and eat their meals in a temporary hut called a sukkah. Our sages tell us that the reason for this law was simply to remind human beings that it is not always to be their lot to dwell safely in their permanent abodes. There will come time in the history of mankind where we will have to know how to exist in a temporary hut, a sukkah, for human life is frail, and in the Sukkah we are much more conditioned to the whims of life and the truth of historic experience. It was during such a time, in the most temporary existence in the history of mankind, known as the Shoah, the Holocaust, that Dr. de Sousa Mendes performed his great heroic task. And it is appropriate, therefore, on the festival of Sukkot, for Jews and non-Jews to gather together to remember the fact that it is not the friends that are with us in the times of permanence, when we sit in comfort and there's nothing to worry about, that we ought to remember. But it's the few friends that we have in the temporary moments when we live in Sukkot, in times of historic darkness. It is those friends to whom we owe the gift of life and the great gratitude. It's ironic in history that both Wallenberg and de Sousa Mendes, that all the honors that come to them after either their death or their imprisonment. It is ironic that mankind did not see fit to honor them when they were alive. As much as it is a privilege to speak to the children and grandchildren of Dr. de Sousa Mendes, it would have been a greater honor to speak to him and to his dear wife. But it's a sad state of history that man sometimes has to wait 40 and 50 years to recognize greatness, to recognize righteousness. Why is it that nobody in the world could approach the Portuguese government in the late 40s, in the early 50s, when it would have made a difference? It is an honor to be here. I hope that from this we learn that we maybe should not convene 30 years from now to talk about either Nudel, that we should convene 30 years from now to talk about Sakharov, that maybe the world should unite so that the Sakharovs and the Nudels will have the privilege of seeing that they're appreciated in their lifetime, and that they shouldn't have to wait until 30 years down the line when people will commemorate their deeds and their noble acts. Nonetheless, we want to say to the distinguished family of Dr. de Sousa Mendes gathered here today, the Jewish people are known for one thing: a collective memory. All of the customs of the Jewish people, many of them have endured for 3,500 years. I know that I speak on behalf of many Jews throughout the world when I say that so long as there will be a Jewish people, so long will they remember the name of Dr. de Sousa Mendes. And that indeed is a great privilege, because in Jewish history, the Jews have withered time. And in the history of our people, in the oral traditions of our people, as grandfathers tell their sons and daughters, they will always tell the story of Wallenberg and de Sousa Mendes. And may that be the comfort of the family that has waited so long for the world to recognize this great deed. Thank you.
Camps. Unfortunately, time does not permit me to mention the many other special guests who are with us today. At this time, I wish to call upon Mr. Ilan Elgar, consul from the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles. Mr. Elgar.
I stand here on this occasion with great humility in the presence of such deeds as Aristides de Sousa Mendes has done during the time of the greatest Holocaust of the Jewish people. So you will excuse me if my voice falters occasionally. We are, I think, really in the presence of a great person, even if he's not with us today. As I was reading the piece, the very complete article in the paper about Dr. Sousa, I really had to be in awe of his actions. They were described by Professor Judah Bauer, who is perhaps the greatest authority on the Holocaust, as perhaps the largest rescue action by a single individual during the Holocaust. I think after that there is nothing else to add. This speaks volumes for anybody who is even slightly aware of those darkest days. And as I was reading it, something came to my mind. It's a small piece that, of all things, was written out as an advertisement by an American corporation. But I think it is highly appropriate for Aristides de Sousa Mendes. It is called, "Will the Real You Please Stand Up?" Submit to pressure from peers and you move down to their level. Speak up for your own beliefs and you invite them up to your level. If you move with the crowd, you'll get no further than the crowd. When 40 million people believe in a dumb idea, it's still a dumb idea. Simply swimming with the tide leaves you nowhere. So if you believe in something that's good, honest, and right, stand up for it. Maybe your peers will get smart and drift your way. It's a great pity that Aristides de Sousa Mendes' peers have taken such a long time to catch up with him, but he was really a trailblazer. In Genesis, we are told about Cain after he murdered his brother Abel, and God called to him and said, "Where's your brother?" And he said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" We really would like to be numbered among the descendants of Abel. We are our brother's keepers, and we would like to be remembered also as our keepers' keepers. Aristides de Sousa Mendes was certainly one of the greatest keepers we can think of in modern Jewish history. And as we are now in the period of atonement, we've just passed Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when every Jew makes his peace with his God in order to be written in the book of life and not in the book of death. May I just end with the ancient Jewish wish, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, may you always be written in the book of life. Thank you.
I now wish to call upon someone who has traveled quite a distance from Woodstock, Illinois, to be with us today. Mr. Isaac Bitton received a letter from me about a week ago informing him of this event. Without hesitation, he called and told me that he would certainly be here today. Mr. Isaac Bitton.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very great pleasure and great honor for me to be here today and be part of this honor to Dr. Aristides de Sousa Mendes do Amaral e Abranches. On different occasions in the past, I have heard this statement that to remember is to live, and to forget is a sin against memory. And I believe that we could add today also that to forget is also a great sin against humanity and history, and specifically Jewish history. I was born in Lisbon, Portugal. I'm a so-called Alfacinha. I was a part of 5 brothers and 5 sisters. And my brother and I, Abraham, we immigrated to Palestine, to Eretz Israel, together with several hundred Jewish refugees on January 23rd, 1943, aboard the Portuguese ship Niassa. In fact, a year later, another ship, a Portuguese ship, left Lisbon, was the Guinea, and 2 of my sisters also immigrated to Israel at the time. And at this period, the Portuguese Jewish community was very small, within 1,000 people. But nevertheless, however small they were, there were several members that had a variety of offices in high position. One of them was Dr. Jaime Chaim Atias, who at the time was the secretary, the personal secretary of Oscar Carmona, the president of Portugal. By the way, he was also my father's godfather. Another gentleman of great stature was Professor Amzalag, who was at the time the Dean of Sciences at the university in Portugal. Another one was Dr. Sentop Sequeira, who was the city attorney for the city of Lisbon. His brother Joel Sequeira was the director of the Portuguese Jewish community in conjunction with the American Joint Committee that had saved the lives of the Jewish children from France, Spain to Portugal and then on from there. And here I'm certain, and there's no doubt in my mind, that Dr. Aristides de Sousa Mendes has a great deal to do with it by issuing visas to these children as well. By the way, Niassa also had made one stop, was in Cadiz, Spain, and in Spain we picked up several other hundreds of children who also, I'm certain, had something to do with Dr. Aristides de Sousa Mendes' visas. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But anyway, in this time in history, the Portugal, Lisbon was the center for heaven for a variety of spies and whatever. But I particularly would like to emphasize, do not recall any incident whatsoever of anti-Semitism against the Jewish community in Lisbon. As a matter of fact, I may say that by and large the Portuguese people were helpful and they were good people. Whatever happened in the high echelons of the Portuguese government, I cannot comment on that because I don't know. I was at the time I was a teenager, and from that standpoint is really whatever I remember is what I want to talk about. But I remember one occasion in which several of the immigrants were put in jail by the local authorities simply because their visas had expired, and it appears that at the time to be, those powers were not quite concerned about the human aspects of it, but pretty much they were not concerned with their misery. They were not concerned with what these people, these refugees had gone through. They were particularly more concerned with one aspect of basically, which I believe was the immigration laws. And in this case, Portugal was not alone. There was many other countries that were so concerned with those laws. But anyway, at this point in time, the Jewish community was able to negotiate with the Portuguese authorities to allow these refugees to stay in several small communities and out of jail. Obviously, a lot of these people were academics, doctors, engineers, and what have you not. But nevertheless, we had the Portuguese community had a very small hospital and a dining room which was called the Cozinha Econômica Israelita de Lisboa, in the Travessa de Noronha, very small street. And it was here that, as a teenager, I used to hang around. My Aunt Esther was, in fact, in charge of the food distribution at the time at the Cozinha Econômica Israelita de Lisboa. And I used to be there to help. And in one of these occasions, there was two dining rooms, one for the Portuguese Jews, another poor, and the other side was for the refugees, with several, probably 2 dining halls accommodating maybe within 200 people. And it was here on one occasion that I was very surprised when I heard this family entering the dining room speaking Portuguese. I was impressed by the gentleman who had the great stature and also sort of resembled my father a little bit. And I out of curiosity, I approached this gentleman and I asked, what were they doing here on this side of the dining room as opposed to on the other side of the dining room? I said, this is for the refugees. And I remember clearly his answer. He was, we too are refugees. Nós também somos refugiados. And then I asked him, why are you a refugee? I was a teenager at the time. I couldn't quite understand. I was curious. And then he said, sit down, and he told me his story. He told me that he was the Portuguese consul in Bordeaux, France, and he also told me why he had been released from his duties. And from there on, I remember different occasions that I had spoken to him, but within a very short period of time, Dr. Branches had apparently left Lisbon. I do not know where he went at the time. But nevertheless, I also remember a variety of other people that appeared over there. I remember, for some reason, I don't know exactly why, but I remember a fellow by the name of, what was his name? Austrian, he was from Austria or Hungary, was Gustav Samek. He had set up his shop on one corner of the dining room as a shoe repairman to help the other refugees repairing their shoes. I remember the family Deutsch. I remember the family Gutmann, who later on helped me in Israel to settle in Nahariya, Israel. I remember a very old lady from Gibraltar. Her name was Rachel. She always used to cry. She spoke only Spanish. I remember asking, ¿Por qué está llorando, señora Raquel? And her answer was always, llorando es mi suerte. But nevertheless, whatever transpired in Lisbon at this time, one could write a book about it. But I know, as a matter of fact, that if it had not been for the gracious, heroic acts of Dr. de Sousa Mendes do Amaral e Branches, those thousands of refugees that passed through Portugal and were able to survive, that went and traveled with me to Israel aboard the Nyassa and the Guinea, they who had never been alive. And for this, I believe very, very deeply that Dr. de Sousa Mendes, and there's no doubt in my mind, not only was he a hero, but the way we say perhaps in Yiddish, in Hebrew, he was also a mensch. Thank you.
At this time, I wish to call upon Mr. Alan Kasdan, co-chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, to present the Center's Scroll of Honor. I also wish to call upon Mr. John Abranches, Mr. Sebastian Mendes, and Mr. Carlos Mendes.
Let me read to you the inscription on the scroll. The Board of Trustees of the Simon Wiesenthal Center takes great pride in bestowing a scroll of honor posthumously upon Aristides de Sousa Mendes do Amaral e Branches in recognition of his righteous conduct on behalf of the threatened Jews and other victims of Nazi persecution during the Holocaust. May his acts serve as a beacon of light and model of hope for future generations. Presented to the family of the late Aristides de Sousa Mendes on October 20th, 1986.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I am very happy and deeply honored that all of you should be here to help pay homage to my father. It is hard to believe that after so many frustrating years, the world is finally recognizing the humanitarian actions of my father, that after so many years of hard work, our efforts have been rewarded. Who could believe the circulation of a petition to President Soares of Portugal could have generated such success? This past May, Congressman Tony Coelho, the only member of Congress of Portuguese ancestry, became aware of the story and decided to circulate a resolution in Congress to help us straighten the record, to right a terrible wrong. Then Congressman Henry Waxman of Los Angeles joined the campaign, became the first co-sponsor of the resolution with Congressman Coelho, and initiated sending a letter to President Soares with the signatures of some 70 congressmen. About 3 months later, the government of Portugal notified Congressman Coelho that a special Medal of Honor would be awarded to Dr. Sousa Mendes. Our family is grateful for their support. My gratitude also goes to Mr. Robert Jacobitz of the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Greater East Bay, who last April found out about our struggle, brought the idea of a resolution to Congressman Coelho, and has since that time been my right arm for the last 7 months. Last spring, Mr. Jacobitz, along with Dr. David Spiro of Yad Vashem and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, formed the International Committee for the commemoration of Aristides de Sousa Mendes, with offices in Oakland and Jerusalem. I also wish to thank Ms. Penny Newman of the University of Leeds in England for all her support on our behalf. And of course, I wish to thank my devoted wife, Joan, for her unfailing commitment and for giving me the strength to continue to carry out our campaign through so many years of frustration. And a very special thank you to all who signed the petition. Last but not least, I wish to thank Dr. Margolis, Rabbi Heyer, and the St. Wiesenthal Center for making this gathering and homage possible. Both my parents, I am sure, would be very honored to be here. Thank you all very much, and may God bless you.
I would also like to call upon Mr. Sebastian Mendes to share some of his thoughts with us this morning.
And opinions about politics, religion, and family life, and all that mattered. One day he said, I disobeyed the orders from the government because I'd rather be with God against men than with men against God. To Rabbi Kruger, he said that in rescuing the Jews, he wanted to give Portugal the honor of welcoming the Jews back, thereby erasing the crime Portugal perpetrated in 1497 at the time of the Inquisition. After being sick with discouragement in bed, for 3 days Dr. Mendes rose as though he had been well all along. He gave 2 of his sons and staff orders to grant free of charge a visit to anyone who applied. He said he had received a divine message to go and liberate the oppressed. He had been given a divine power. What reasons did he have for acting as he did? He was a Christian, the father of 14 children. He had as many reasons to save the innocent from the claws of the beast as there were fugitives. He was his own man, and thank God for that. His wife, my mother, assisted him. after 46 years, a grateful society, and the denomination. That is proper. I'm very proud of my parents, both of them. They both did the job together. Thank you.
I want to thank both John and Sebastian. In contacting different members of the family, there's another member of the family that lives in California, and unfortunately, Teresina could not make it. She wrote to me, and I'd like to read a portion of the letter. Dear Dr. Margolis, I was very pleased with your letter concerning the ceremony and press conference in honor of my father, Aristides de Sousa Mendes. I would like you to know that I deeply appreciate what has been done in the past for my family and what you are doing now. I am truly pleased and greatly honored that this day has finally come. My husband and myself will not be able to attend, but our thoughts will be with you on that day. The kindness of the Simon Wiesenthal Center will be remembered always. At this time, I wish to call upon the entire Mendes Abranches family. We also have with us a grandchild, Frank Mendes, the great-grandchildren, twins, I believe, could not make it, to have the entire family come up to rekindle the flame of remembrance. I'd also like to call upon Cantor Avshalom Katz to lead us in song. Congressman Waxman, please come forward too.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
I want to thank everyone for attending this event this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amid the death and despair during the Nazi occupation of France, there was a ray of hope. One man, an angel of mercy, helped tens of thousands of potential Nazi victims escape the horror. Now, almost a half a century later, this hero is being honored. In profile tonight, Aristides de Sousa Mendes. Andrea Kaiser reports.
It was 1940. Hitler's campaign against the Jews was approaching France. Hundreds of thousands of refugees were locked behind the borders of Nazi territory because no country was accepting them. Millions would be sent to their death in concentration camps. But 30,000 refugees were saved from this fate because of this man, Portuguese Consul General Aristides de Sousa Mendes, who was stationed in France. He defied his own government, writing illegal visas and passports to fleeing refugees.
If it hadn't been for him, I couldn't say for sure, but I don't think I'd be here today, or any of my family, or a lot of, they say 30,000 people. There's no way of counting.
But the man who helped Michael Spetz and his family out of occupied France into Portugal paid dearly for his actions. De Sousa Mendes' government kicked him out of the diplomatic corps, disbarred him from practicing law, and erased his name from the history books. He died in 1954 a pauper. The Portuguese fascist government considered him a criminal.
People started ignoring us, and we didn't have money to eat, no money to pay rent in Lisbon.
For 46 years, De Sousa Mendes' children have worked to get their father recognized as a hero. The Jewish people have long recognized De Sousa Mendes' heroics. His name is inscribed on the wall of the Simon Wiesenthal Center's museum, alongside those of other outstanding non-Jewish people who risked their lives during the Holocaust.
I know that I speak on behalf of many Jews throughout the world when I say that so long as there will be a Jewish people, so long will they remember the name of Dr. De Sousa Mendes.
A ceremony was held today at the Simon Wiesenthal Center to coincide with the recent announcement that the Portuguese government will finally recognize the heroism of their diplomat with a Medal of Honor. But it took a change of government and pressure from the U.S. Congress to move Portugal to action.
After 46 years, a grateful society, and the denomination, that is proper. I'm very proud of my parents.
But today's ceremonies do not end the family's efforts on behalf of their father. They want Portugal to restore and return the family home and build a memorial in Lisbon for De Sousa Mendes.
At long last, the government of Portugal is showing some decency and compassion, and but we cannot forget.
For the Independent News, I'm Andrea Kaiser in Los Angeles.
A man who may have helped more Jews escape Hitler than anyone else has been honored at last after a 46-year struggle by his family to gain recognition. The descendants of Dr. Aristides Mendes gathered at the Simon Wiesenthal Center today to remember his sacrifice. The doctor was stripped of his Portuguese diplomatic status when he issued visas to thousands of Jews who were trying to escape France during the war. His son was grateful today that recognition has finally come.
After 46 years, a grateful society, and the denomination, that is proper. I'm very proud of my parents, both of them. They both did the job together.
The doctor and his wife had 14 children. Many speakers at today's ceremony noted that they had much to lose by helping the Jews. And indeed, Dr. Mendes was forced to retire without compensation, and he died in poverty in 1954. Portugal has finally agreed to honor Mendes for his heroic actions in World War II.
And here's some good news tonight. 46 years ago, a Portuguese diplomat was stripped of his status and forced to retire in poverty because he helped thousands of Jews escape Hitler during World War II. Well, now Portugal has agreed to honor Dr. Aristides Mendes for his sacrifice, and his descendants gathered at the Simon Wiesenthal Center today to mark the occasion. Dr. Mendes was a Christian with 14 children. That's plenty of reason not to get involved, but that did not stop him. And today he is remembered 32 years after his death for his heroic actions.
After 46 years, a grateful society and the denomination. That is proper. I'm very proud of my parents, both of them. They both did the job together.
Historians believe that Dr. Mendes may have saved as many as 30,000 Jews from Hitler's death camps, and his family had been pushing for recognition all this time, and today the emotion overcame all of his family members, including his son, so this was a wonderful day for them.
Certainly was.
Local honors for a Portuguese diplomat who helped tens of thousands of fugitives escape Nazi terror in occupied France. Aristides de Sousa Mendes is credited with saving some 30,000 lives. Warren Wilson reports from the Simon Wiesenthal Center.
Shown here in 1929 with his wife and some of their 14 children, Aristides de Sousa Mendes was described as a good and great man with magnificent goals of saving Jews from the reaches of the Nazi Empire. He was later stripped of his diplomatic title and blocked from practicing law. Unable to find work, he died penniless. Today, a crowd of rabbis, foreign dignitaries, and local residents gathered at the Simon Wiesenthal Center to pay tribute to the former Portuguese consul who is credited with saving the lives of 30,000 refugees destined for Hitler's ovens. 3 of his sons attended the ceremony. Sebastian Mendes delivered a compassionate accounting of his father's deeds while serving as Portugal's diplomat assigned to France.
He gave 2 of his sons and staff orders to grant free of charge a visit to anyone who applied. He said he had received a divine message to go and liberate the oppressed. He had been given a divine power.
De Sousa Mendes was honored posthumously with a scroll, and then the audience witnessed the rekindling of the flame of remembrance.
It is an honor that is long overdue for Dr. Mendes, and it reminds us of the great moral courage that this man brought to the world in allowing visas to be given to tens of thousands of Jews to escape Nazi terror.
This ceremony, 46 years in coming, finally and officially honors yet another hero in the resistance to Nazism. Officials here say this was only the first step in trying to get worldwide recognition for De Sousa Mendes' extraordinary achievements. From West Los Angeles, Warren Wilson, Channel 5 News at 10.